My name is Savannah, and I'm about to tell you the story of how my parents tried to destroy my dreams and how I turned their betrayal into my greatest triumph. It was a cold February morning in 2018 when my world came crashing down. I was 18, a senior at Lincoln Park High School in Chicago, and I had just received my acceptance letter to the Culinary Institute of America. My hands were shaking as I held that letter. It was everything I had ever wanted. I remember running down the stairs of our Victorian home in Lincoln Park, my heart pounding with excitement. The smell of my mother's coffee filled the air, mixing with the aroma of the sourdough bread I had baked at that morning. Yes, even at 18, I was already waking up before dawn to perfect my craft. "Mom, Dad," I called out, bursting into our spacious kitchen with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances that I had begged them to install. I got into CIA. My father, William, looked up from his Wall Street Journal, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He was wearing his usual navy suit, the uniform of a successful corporate lawyer. My mother, Margaret, turned from the espresso machine, her perfectly styled blonde hair not moving an inch despite the early hour. "The Central Intelligence Agency?" my mother asked, confused. "Savannah, you're only 18. No, Mom," I laughed, my excitement bubbling over. "The Culinary Institute of America, in New York. I can finally become a real chef." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as my father's face darkened, the same expression he wore when dealing with difficult clients. My mother's perfectly manicured hand flew to her chest. "Absolutely not," my father said, his voice cutting through the morning air like a knife. "We've discussed this, Savannah. Cooking is not a career, it's a hobby. But Dad, this is my dream. I've been cooking since I was 12. Remember when I won the state culinary competition? When Chef Rodriguez from Alinea said I had natural talent." "Talent doesn't pay the bills," he replied coldly, folding his newspaper with sharp, precise movements. "Do you know how much money we've invested in your education? How much we've spent on your private school, your tutoring, your SAT prep?" My mother stepped forward, her voice softer but equally firm. "Sweetheart, we've already enrolled you at the University of Chicago for pre-law. You start in the fall. You'll follow in your father's footsteps. Become a lawyer, have stability, respect." "But I don't want to be a lawyer." The words exploded out of me. "I want to create, to feed people, to make them happy with my food." My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. At 6'2", he towered over me, and I suddenly felt like a small child again. "Listen to me very carefully, Savannah," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You will go to the University of Chicago. You will study law, and you will forget this ridiculous fantasy about cooking. If you even think about pursuing this culinary nonsense, we will cut off all financial support. No tuition, no housing, no allowance, nothing." "William," my mother interjected, but he held up his hand. "I'm not finished," he continued. "You'll be completely on your own. No family connections, no safety net. You'll see how far your passion gets you when you're living on the streets." I felt tears burning my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You can't be serious. Try me," he said, his gray eyes cold as steel. "Your mother and I have worked too hard to build this family's reputation for you to throw it away playing with food." My mother reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. "Savannah, honey, we just want what's best for you. The restaurant industry is brutal. The hours are terrible, the pay is awful, and there's no job security. We want you to have a good life." "A good life according to who?" I shot back. "You? Your country club friends? What about what I want?" "What you want is irrelevant," my father said bluntly. "You're 18 years old. You don't know anything about the real world. When you're 30 and successful, you'll thank us." I looked around our kitchen, the kitchen where I had spent countless hours perfecting my techniques, where I had created dishes that made my parents' dinner guests rave with compliments. The same kitchen where my dreams were now being murdered. "I need time to think," I whispered. "There's nothing to think about," my father replied, straightening his tie. "The decision has been made. You start at U of C in September, or you're on your own." As my parents left for work that morning, I stood alone in that kitchen, holding my acceptance letter to culinary school. The paper felt heavy in my hands not because of its weight, but because of the weight of the choice I was being forced to make. I walked over to the window and looked out at the Chicago skyline, the morning sun reflecting off the glass towers where my father worked. Somewhere in that concrete jungle was my future, but which future? The one my parents had mapped out for me, or the one I had dreamed of since I was a little girl standing on a step stool, helping my grandmother make her famous apple pie? That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I would go to the University of Chicago, but I wouldn't give up on my dreams. I would find a way to do both, even if it killed me. Little did I know, it almost would. The University of Chicago's Gothic Revival buildings loomed over me like prison walls as I walked across the quad that first September morning in 2018. My backpack was heavy with law textbooks I had no interest in reading, and my heart felt even heavier. I had made my choice, or rather, my parents had made it for me. But I had also made a secret promise to myself. I would not let my culinary dreams die, no matter what it took. My dorm room in Max Pilevsky Residential Commons was small and sterile, nothing like the warm, aromatic kitchen back home. My roommate, Jessica, was a bubbly pre-med student from Connecticut who talked constantly about her future as a surgeon. She had her whole life planned out, just like my parents wanted for me. "So you're pre-law too?" she asked on our first night, while organizing her color-coded study schedule. "That's so cool. My dad says lawyers make great money." "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Great money." But money wasn't what kept me awake that first week. It was the smell of the dining hall's terrible food, the sound of sizzling pans I could hear from the kitchen, and the ache in my chest every time I passed a restaurant. By my second week, I couldn't take it anymore. I remember walking down North Michigan Avenue after my constitutional law class, feeling completely lost. The city buzzed around me, tourists taking photos, business people rushing to meetings, street musicians playing for tips. And then I saw it, a small sign in the window of a cozy Italian restaurant called Nonna's Kitchen. Help wanted. Kitchen assistant. No experience necessary. Willing to train. My hands were shaking as I pushed open the door. The restaurant was warm and inviting, with checkered tablecloths and the most incredible aroma I had ever smelled. An elderly Italian woman emerged from the kitchen, flour dusting her apron. "You hear about the job?" she asked in a thick accent, looking me up and down. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Savannah. I'm Rosa Benedetti, but everyone calls me Nonna Rosa." "You ever work in a kitchen before?" I thought about lying, but something in her kind eyes made me tell the truth. "Not professionally, but I've been cooking since I was 12. I actually got accepted to culinary school, but..." I trailed off. "But what?" "My parents want me to be a lawyer instead." Nonna Rosa studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. Slowly. "Ah, I see. The old story, parents who think they know better than the heart." "When can you start?" "I have classes during the day, but I could work evenings and weekends." "Perfect. We're busiest then anyway. But I warn you, this is hard work. Hot kitchens, long hours, demanding customers." "You sure you want this?" "More than anything," I said, and I meant it. That night, I called my parents to tell them about my first week of classes. I talked about my professors, my coursework, my study groups. I didn't mention that I had just gotten a job in a kitchen. The lies came easier than I expected. My double life began immediately. Monday through Friday, I was Savannah, the law student sitting in lecture halls, taking notes on tort law and constitutional principles, participating in study groups with classmates who actually cared about legal precedents. But Tuesday through Sunday nights, I was Savannah, the cook, chopping vegetables, learning to work a professional grill, absorbing everything Nonna Rosa could teach me about authentic Italian cuisine. "You have good hands," she told me after my first week, watching me julienne carrots with the knife skills I had taught myself from YouTube videos. "But more important, you have the passion. I can see it in your eyes when you cook." The work was brutal. I would finish my last class at p.m., sprint to the restaurant, and work until a.m., then I'd go back to my dorm, shower off the smell of garlic and olive oil, and study until a.m. before catching a few hours of sleep. Jessica started to notice. "You're never here anymore," she said one Thursday night as I crept into our room at 1:30 a.m. "Where do you go every night?" "Library." I lied. You know how demanding pre-law is. But it was getting harder to hide. My clothes constantly smelled like food. Despite my best efforts, I had burns on my arms from the grill. My hands were permanently stained with turmeric and beet juice. The worst part was lying to my parents during our weekly phone calls. "How are your classes going, sweetheart?" My mother would ask every Sunday. Great, Mom. Professor Williams says I have real potential in constitutional law, and you're not thinking about that cooking nonsense anymore? Of course not, I would say, while standing in Nana Rosa's kitchen, covered in flour from making fresh pasta. By November, I was exhausted but exhilarated. My grades were suffering. I was pulling B's and C's instead of my usual A's, but I was learning more in that kitchen than I ever had in a classroom. Nana Rosa had started letting me create my own dishes for the daily specials. My butternut squash ravioli with brown butter sage sauce became so popular that customers started requesting it specifically. You're not just a cook, she told me one busy Saturday night as we prepped for the dinner rush. You're an artist. Don't let anyone tell you different. But my two worlds were about to collide in the worst possible way. It was a cold December evening, just before finals week. I was working the grill, completely focused on a perfect risotto, when I heard a familiar voice from the dining room. This place looks charming, Margaret. The reviews online were excellent. My blood turned to ice. It was my father's voice. I peeked through the kitchen window and saw them, my parents, sitting at table 12, studying the menu I had helped create. Savannah, Nana Rosa called. Take this oso buco to table 12. I can't, I whispered, panic rising in my throat. Those are my parents. She looked confused until she saw my face. The ones who want you to be a lawyer? I nodded, unable to speak. Go, she said firmly. Face them. It's time they saw who you really are. With trembling hands, I picked up the plate and walked toward table 12, my heart pounding so loud I was sure the entire restaurant could hear it. My mother saw me first. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth, her eyes widening in shock. Savannah, she whispered. My father looked up, and I watched his face cycle through confusion, recognition, and finally, rage. What the hell are you doing here? He hissed, keeping his voice low but his fury unmistakable. I set down the plate with shaking hands. I work here. You work here? My mother's voice was barely audible. But you said you were studying every night. I am studying, I said, finding my voice. I'm studying what I love. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Other diners were starting to stare. We're leaving, he said coldly. And you're coming with us. Now. No, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. I'm working. Not anymore, you're not. He threw his napkin on the table. You've made your choice, Savannah. Don't expect another penny from us. As they stormed out of the restaurant, my mother looked back once, tears in her eyes. But she didn't stop walking. I stood there in the middle of the dining room, my secret finally exposed, my family walking away from me, and my future more uncertain than ever. But for the first time in months, I felt free. The silence in my dorm room was deafening after my parents left the restaurant that night. Jessica had gone home for winter break, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the devastating reality of what had just happened. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Your tuition for spring semester will not be paid. You have until January 15th to find alternative arrangements or withdraw from the university. 12 days. I had 12 days to figure out how to pay $25,000 for spring tuition, or my academic career was over. I sat on my narrow dorm bed, staring at my acceptance letter to the Culinary Institute of America that I had kept hidden in my desk drawer. It was dated almost a year ago now, a lifetime ago, it seemed. I wondered if it was too late to accept, if they would even consider me after I had essentially ghosted them. The next morning, I walked into Nana Rosa's kitchen with red, swollen eyes. Cara Mia, she said softly, immediately wrapping me in a flour-dusted hug. I heard what happened last night. I'm so sorry. They cut me off, I whispered into her shoulder. Completely. No tuition, no housing, nothing. She pulled back and looked at me with those wise, dark eyes. So what are you going to do? I don't know. I can't afford to stay in school without their help. Maybe I should just drop out, get a full-time job somewhere. Stop, she said firmly. Sit down. She poured 2 cups of espresso and sat across from me at the small table in the back of the kitchen where we usually prepped vegetables. "Let me tell you a story," she began. "When I was 22, I came to America from Sicily with nothing but a suitcase and my Nana's recipe book. My family back home thought I was crazy, a young woman, traveling alone to a foreign country where she didn't even speak the language properly. I sipped my espresso, the bitter warmth grounding me. I worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, watching children during the day, and cooking in a terrible diner on weekends. For 2 years, I saved every penny. People told me I was wasting my time, that I should find a nice Italian boy and settle down. But I had a dream. This restaurant? This restaurant," she nodded. "It took me 8 years to save enough money to open it. 8 years of working 18-hour days, of eating nothing but pasta and bread, of sleeping on my cousin's couch. But you know what kept me going?" I shook my head. The knowledge that I was building something that was mine, something that came from my heart, not from what other people expected of me. She reached across the table and took my hands in hers. They were warm and calloused from decades of kitchen work. "You have a choice to make, Savannah. You can go back to your parents, apologize, promise to be a good little lawyer, and spend the rest of your life wondering what if. Or you can take a leap of faith. But I don't have any money, any connections, you have talent," she interrupted. "You have passion, and you have me." She stood up and walked to the old cash register, pulling out a worn envelope from underneath. "I've been saving this for the right moment," she said, placing it in front of me. "It's not much, but it's enough to get you started." I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were $20 bills, 50s, even a few hundreds. I counted quickly. There was almost 3. "Oh, Nana Rosa, I can't take this. It's not a gift," she said with a smile. "It's an investment. In 6 months, when you have your own food truck and you're making money, you pay me back with interest." "Food truck? S. You're not ready for a restaurant yet. But a food truck? That's how you start. Low overhead, direct contact with customers, chance to build a following. I know a man who sells used trucks. He owes me a favor." That afternoon, we drove to a lot on the south side where Tony Marcelli kept his collection of retired food trucks. The one that caught my eye was a 1995 Chevy step van, painted bright yellow with rust spots around the wheel wells. "She's not pretty," Tony said, patting the side of the truck, "but the engine's solid and the kitchen equipment works." Previous owner was an old Greek guy who made gyros. He took good care of her. The inside was cramped but functional: a small grill, a fryer, a prep counter, and just enough space for one person to work efficiently. It smelled like grease and dreams. "How much?" I asked. "For Nana Rosa's Prot. 15,000. And I'll throw in the permits and licenses, they're transferable." My heart sank. Even with Nana Rosa's money, I was nowhere close to $15,000. "I'll co-sign a loan," Nana Rosa said quietly. "But you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll never give up. No matter how hard it gets. No matter how many people tell you you're crazy. Promise me you'll keep cooking." I promise. The next 3 weeks were a blur of paperwork, loan applications, and sleepless nights. I officially withdrew from the University of Chicago on January 10th, 5 days before the tuition deadline. The academic advisor looked at me like I was insane. "You're throwing away your future," she said, shaking her head as she processed my withdrawal forms. "No," I replied, thinking of the food truck waiting for me in Tony's lot. "I'm finally starting it." I moved out of the dorms and into a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat in Little Italy. The rent was $800 a month, and the place was barely bigger than my dorm room. But it was mine. My parents didn't call. Not once. On February 14th, 2019, Valentine's Day, I opened Savannah's Kitchen for the first time. I had chosen a spot near the University of Chicago campus, hoping to catch hungry students between classes. My menu was simple: 3 types of gourmet grilled cheese sandwiches, tomato basil soup, and my signature butternut squash ravioli that had been so popular at Nana Rosa's. I was so nervous that morning that I burned the first batch of soup and had to start over. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the service window at 11 a.m. For the first hour, nobody came. I stood in that tiny kitchen, watching students walk by without even glancing at my truck. Some looked at the menu board I had painted by hand, but kept walking. At T12:15, a girl about my age approached hesitantly. "Are you actually open?" she asked. "Yes," I said, probably too enthusiastically. "What can I get you?" The butternut squash ravioli sounds interesting. Is it good?" "It's my grandmother's recipe," I lied smoothly. "Family secret." She ordered the ravioli and a cup of soup. I prepared it with more care than I had ever put into any dish, making sure every element was perfect. When I handed it to her through the window, she took a bite right there on the sidewalk. I watched. Her face changed surprise, then delight, then pure joy. "Oh my God," she said with her mouth full. "This is incredible." "Really? Really? How much do I owe you?" $8. She handed me a 10. "Keep the change, and I'll be back tomorrow." As she walked away, I felt tears streaming down my face. They weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of pure, overwhelming relief. I had done it. I had taken the leap. By the end of that first day, I had served 12 customers and made 97 in revenue. After expenses, it hit about 30 in profit. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That night, I called Nana Rosa to tell her about my first day. "I'm proud of you, cara mia," she said. "Your real life is just beginning." As I fell asleep in my tiny apartment that night, I thought about my parents in their big house in Lincoln Park. I wondered if they ever thought about me, if they regretted their ultimatum. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about what they thought. I was too busy planning tomorrow's menu.